Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78. You feel that little crisp in the air? I mean, it's a little chilly some nights, and it gets warm. It's that time of year where it's really warm and gets really cold. Fall creeping into the summer sunshine. And unfortunately, for those who love summer like myself, you have fall that is on the precipice right here in September, the 21st, I believe. But either way, it's a great time of year to be in Chicago in the Midwest. I mean, you have Richardson's farm way up north, Bankston's on the south side. You have cemeteries like Graceland and Resurrection that have all this old folklore and stories of ghosts and hauntings and everything else. And a local artist who was like in corporate America that decided a few years back that she's going to just start writing because that was her true passion. Her name is Cynthia Pelayo. She has written some books that have set the horror genre on fire. Female, from Chicago. I mean, she's getting accolades from Stephen King and others. She's written a couple of new books, one of them called The Vanishing Daughters, that has to do a little bit with the Resurrection Mary story and other things. She's written other little things here and there. I can't wait to talk to her now for this story from the 78. Cynthia, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. It's fall. I mean, I love summertime in Chicago, but it's almost unfair to fall because I hate that it's fall, but I also love it because it's fall. It's like the most beautiful time to be here.
And it was like a brutal summer. It was like super bright outside and it's just a little too it was just too hot for me. So I'm fine with this weather. This is my weather where I can be outside at all times.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It was a brutally hot summer, but fall in Chicago, like in my intro, I talked about all the things that kind of pop up in the fall in Chicago. People go out, they're at, pumpkin patches, or they're going for tours of ghost hunters. And, there's Bachelor's Grove Cemetery on the south side, Resurrection Cemetery, all these things. And it kind of parlays into your world of all this horror that you've been doing, and you've been raising a fuss, and I mean that in a good way, about like female writer doing the horror genre out of Chicago. I mean, you have the eye of like Stephen King is all up in your world now. I mean, what is that like for you? Because you were like corporate America not too long ago, and now you're doing this, right?
I was like the definition of corporate America. I worked for like a corporate consult. I worked for the third largest corporate consulting firm in the world. I had the corner office downtown, with the windows overlooking the river, and I was miserable. I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is not, I was good at it. It was interesting work,
Hmm.
but it was just not what I was meant to do. And I remember my undergrad many years ago at Columbia College, and I did it in journalism. And I remember
Ah,
like, when like it was like our graduating class, we were like at the Billy Goat Tavern. This is where our professors took us to the Billy Goat Tavern to like drink beer and have like burgers. And I just
yeah.
remember like a sports journalist for the Sun Times, like, giving me a high five. And he was just like, Cynthia, you just have to do what you love. The money will come later. And I always heard that. And I was like, and I remember hearing him say that when I was just like, I need to do something. I need to do what I love, which is
Hmm.
writing. And here I am, strangely enough.
Well, it's fascinating that the Billy Goat Tavern is where you guys were. I mean, there's a lot of lore about the Billy Goat, but also a hangout for journalists in Chicago, especially in the heyday of journalism in this city, like from the 50s, all the way through very recently, with all the conglomeratization of newspapers. But man, the ones that are like old school still go to the Billy Goat and talk, and that's where you get some of your best stories. So it's funny that because of the writing aspect of the Billy Goat and the storytelling, and some of them being horror stories that were actually true happening, writing, they probably had a typewriter in the corner at the Billy Goat writing up stuff about Gacy and about Jeffrey Dahmer and all these things, among other things, all the happy stuff too. But either way, it's interesting that that was the beginning of it for you.
Yeah, that's where we were told in undergrad. They're like, if you want a good story, if you want to hear what's about to break tomorrow, you go to the Billy Go, and you just listen. You'll see everyone there. But, back in the day, you would see everyone who was anyone. My mentor. So I went into journalism because I'm Puerto Rican. I'm first generation to grow up on the mainland. And if you tell immigrant parents that you're going to study art, in college, they're just going to look at you like you're a crazy person. And so that's what my dad did, looked at me like a crazy person. And I always remember we had the Sun Times and the Tribune in the house.
Hmm.
And before that, my dad was, because he came in the 50s, and he read the Chicago Daily News. He just always had all three papers. For those of us who remember what the Chicago Daily News was.
Yeah, sure.
And and he was just like, "You're going to do journalism because you can do a lot with journalism. You can pivot to PR and marketing, and that's what I wound up doing in my day job." But my mentor was Les Brownlee at Columbia College. He was like one of the first Black news reporters on Channel 7.
Hmm.
And I remember he would always have like these big Thanksgiving parties, and he would invite his students. And I met like John Cass there and Studs Terkel, and I'm like, what is happening? And so, for a kid that grew up in interstate Chicago, that grew up reading about all these like, giants of journalism in the city, to have them there, and just to hear their stories, I mean, it's impacted my life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you just mentioned like the Hall of Fame of Chicago journalists. I mean, I have like the Sidewalks book from a Chicago Tribune author, and I'm a nerd for Chicago. I love our history and our city, and not all of it is great, but it is our history, and I love it. And I read something that you posted not that long ago, and it was just about like enjoying the day. I think you guys went to like you got like
Yeah.
Italian ice and you enjoy like Humboldt Park, and I'm like, that's a Chicagoan right there that knows what's up, like walking. Like, I think Humboldt Park, the park itself, is one of the, if not the most beautiful park in the entire city. I think it's it's prettier than Grant Park because it's so ornately unique and beautiful with the lagoon and the boathouse, all the things, man. Like, you just know how to do it.
And that's what I always think. Like, it's so strange to me. We've been the boogeyman in the news for a long time, and I'm not going to smooth it over that we do have issues. When I grew up on the Northwest Side, and the neighborhood I grew up in, it was nothing like this when I grew up. I
Hmm.
remember Wicker Park before it was Wicker Park. I remember the old Earwax Cafe, like in the, early, like, or late 90s. You just go in there for $5, you get like unlimited coffee and like a cherry pie, and you're just like, it was a very different area.
Yeah.
And
The metro was still, or the double door still was down there.
still there, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm always like perplexed that people are just think it's this, terrifying place. And that was just a regular day for us. Like, we never really plan. We just kind of step out, and it's like, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? We're going to go, okay, let's go to 18th Street today. Let's go get some tamales and coffee at Cafe Jumping Bean. And we can go to like the Museum of Mexican Fine Arts for free. And like, we have so many free resources in this city if you're an artist, and for even culture, like, museums, whatnot. You can go to these museums for free. It's incredible.
It is. And I love what you just said about like being in the city. You can just walk out your door and it can be an adventure. And that was always the thing that made me love this city, is that you can hop on the L and you can go to a different like planet almost, if you're, from the like orange line, hopping on, going all the way down to the loop, and then hopping on the brown line and coming way out to like, the Rockwell station, and be like, where am I? This train is on the ground. It's on the ground level over here. What's that all about? But like, that's how I discovered the city many, many years ago. I mean, I grew up in like the burbs, had family that lived by Midway, and I was always fascinated by the city, where as soon as I was old enough, I'm like, I'm moving back. I'm
Yeah,
moving to the city, where my entire family thought I was crazy because they're like, why would you want to move to the city? And I'm like, why would
yeah,
you want to live in Orland? All due respect, why would you want to live in Orland Park? Like, not for me, man. No, no, thank you. I like the trains, and I like you know what, even I'll like the traffic if it was either with traffic or not, you know what I mean? Like, I just love the city. I just love what it's about, and it's got a lot of stories to tell, and it seems that you found something that is really hitting with audiences in the horror genre, as the the fabric of Chicago woven into some of your books. I mean, you have the new one out here, Vanishing Daughters, that has a little bit to do with Resurrection Cemetery, right?
right. And so I think my fascination of course, like what you said, it's just like this really fantastical place. And I remember growing up, I grew up in the 80s, and even at my elementary school, we had German, Irish, Polish, Greek, Latino, and everybody spoke their languages.
Hmm.
And everyone kind of had their culture. And this was back in the day when you can like bring different food into school, and people would
Right. Nobody was
bring.
worried about peanut allergies.
No one was worried about like someone spiking something. And so I just remember I remember growing up with, I'm Puerto Rican, but I remember growing up with pierogi and sauerkraut and Greek food, and it was just part of our neighborhood. It was just part of the identity. Everybody was always outside, and everybody got along, and we all recognized that we were different, and we all kind of brought our differences together, and it was just super cool. And I always remember everything cultural or artistic was New York, LA, New York,
Mm.
LA.
Drives
And
me nuts.
I've been to New York enough times to know I never want to return. The last time I went to New York was for like a book signing, and I was like, I cannot come here because there is this coldness and like detachment to people in these coasts that I don't understand. But we still have this really lovely like Midwestern affection in Chicago, and I wanted to start really highlighting these really amazing aspects of Chicago. Yeah, everyone knows John Wayne Gacy, but do you know that Walt Disney was born here?
Hmm.
And yeah, everyone
Not
knows
too
that. Yeah,
not
not too
too
many
far
people.
where you grew up, right? I mean, he was and like
I
the
could walk. Yeah, I could
yeah.
literally walk to Walt Disney's birthplace and Humboldt Park. L. Frank Baum wrote pieces of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz at Humboldt Park.
Hmm.
And, we know all of these awful things, but do we all know all these fantastical things? And then there's this something about Chicago that, I mean, we're hardy people, but we're
Yeah.
kind people, but and we also recognize our scars. I want to be able to approach it with as much respect as possible, the issues that we have here, and show how beautiful and resilient people are here.
And yeah, you've definitely done that. I think that's why it struck such a chord. And I have a book here that you were mentioned with. Like, this
Oh,
is
red
one of
line.
their new ones, right? Talk about this one, if you will, a little bit.
So the Red Line Chicago Horror Stories,
Hmm.
that's an independent press run out of Chicago. And he wanted to bring a number of people from different neighborhoods. Like even one of the writers is like a fruit player. But even one of the writers was like he was like a taxi cab driver for like a long time. He was like in his 70s. And so the editor wanted to bring like this, really like variety of writers and experiences to write a story. I've never had such anxiety writing a story before,
Oh, really?
um, because I knew it was just Chicago centric and there were all these other people. And I sort of like wrote this. I'm also a poet. And so I wrote what turned out to be the introduction. And I wanted to just touch on a number of what I called saintly or holy type of strange phenomenon
Hmm.
in the city of Chicago, as well as like these really harsh things. So, like everyone knows, of course, we all know Resurrection Mary, and we know the Whole House Double baby. But they're also like, did you all know like the largest um, uh, location for like saintly like artifacts? It's like right outside of Chicago. It's like super random. And then like Mother
Imagine.
Cabrini, like Cabrini Green, was named after like the first American person named to become the first American saint. And it was just really strange that
Hmm.
that hospital was torn down, but they kept her chapel. There's like all these like really interesting saintly phenomena about Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, I think any kid that grows up in or around the city has grown up with old like horror stories or ghost stories or folklores, like and you just mentioned that how you kind of weave in some of those things. Why is it so important to you to use those things? Is it because of that warmness that you find that it's easier to pull stories out of things that seem very authentic?
I was also a journalist for a while. So after I left undergrad, I was working as a journalist by night while doing my corporate gig,
Oh
and
man,
I had to
that's a
leave.
lot.
Yeah, I because I wanted to keep writing, And
Hmm.
I eventually had to leave my I eventually had to leave journalism because of PTSD from covering crime. And I applied to the School of the Art Institute and I got rejected, but then they accepted me after like they called me. There's like a whole story behind that. But I was originally rejected my application because it was a journalism application and I was applying to a fine arts program. And
Hmm.
then they asked me, you know, what does a Puerto Rican girl from the hood want to do here? And I was like, I want to write, and it's your job to teach me how to write. So I was admitted,
Good for you.
and yeah, it was a
Talk about being
different
a little
time.
judgy. Yeah, no kidding.
It's a different time when you could, you know, talk to somebody face to face and not just
Hmm.
be not go through a portal. And I remember when I started writing there, I would try to write realism and things I had seen as a journalist and like covering funerals and gang funerals and just covering all these, you know, really high emotional, heated situations. And I tried to write about them. And as I was writing about them, ghosts would just start weaving in and the fantastical would appear. And I think it was my way of kind of protecting myself from being too realistic because at
Hmm.
that point, I think up until recently, it's been a little too difficult to really approach these really, you know, high intense situations from a realistic, just realism. Um, and so that's why ghosts have been appearing in my work.
And you've done these works and has gotten the attention of the likes of Stephen King, where you've contributed to a book that it has his work in there. So, like, what's that like? From being a kid growing up, you were like West Logan, right? Growing up in West
Yeah, yeah,
Logan,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm sure maybe at one point you cracked open a Stephen King book when you were a kid and scared the hell out of yourself, like when you're reading like The Shining or Carrie or what have you, to now being in the same pages as him. Like, what's that like for somebody who was in like a corporate gig just doing their thing in Chicago not even that long ago?
Bizarre. Like it's like, you know, when I always hear people say this stuff is unreal, and it kind of feels unreal. And it's like Steve. And so my understanding was that Stephen King had to read every single story and approve it. And so I remember sending my story and like, there's no way. Like, really?
It's Stephen
And
King.
then Stephen King, like, and so yeah, he read it, he approved it, he mentioned Puerto Rico and the introduction, and I was like, holy shit, you know. And so it's that anthology, the Stand, the
Hmm.
End of the World as We Know It, that's been on the New York Times bestseller list for like 2 weeks, and I'm just like, there's a story that I wrote that's on the New York Times bestseller list, and it's nuts. I had debated whether to write about. People were surprised that I didn't write about Chicago for that, and I wound up writing about Puerto Rico. I've never really written much about Puerto Rico
Hmm.
for a number of reasons. I mean, I was born there, but Chicago's home. Like this is
Yeah,
where I
sure.
grew up, and so you know, I recognize culturally where I'm from, but yeah, I grew up eating like Chicago hot dogs. So it's kind of hard. Like I'm kind of these both places. But I thought, well, let me do something about Puerto Rico because I just felt right. And so I'm happy I did it. But still, it's shocking that it's in there and that he's read my work. So that's cool.
Yeah, I imagine. I mean, I can only speak from my experience, but like when you venture into areas within your expertise or within your love, but maybe perhaps things that are not your wheelhouse, right? Like, so you're a writer, but you haven't written about Puerto Rico. But I feel like when you do stuff like that, like I've interviewed people who are feminists. Like I'm not a feminist because I'm whatever, like, but I believe in it and I want to understand what there are. So I challenge myself to interview people that I don't know or don't understand their world so I can better understand it, right? So I only feel like that makes me better at what I do. I imagine writing about Puerto Rico in that way obviously struck a chord, because it's sitting on the pages of the New York Times bestseller, so it makes you
Yeah,
better writer is what I'm getting at.
great. And you know, and I've talked, I teach writing also. And so I've talked to, there's always like the discussion among my students, like, can we write about different experiences? And I'm always of the mind, like, you should be able to create whatever you want to create. I mean, that he's my dad died in 2023 and I was super close to him.
Mm,
And that was sort of like me memorializing him because he's the one that made me fall in love with, you know, writing and research and Chicago. And he was Mr. Chicago. He loved this town. He loved it here. So he was
yeah.
buried here. He didn't want to be buried in Puerto Rico. I was like, you're burying me in Chicago. And we're like, all right, Dad. So
What was your dad's favorite part about Chicago?
the bars.
Yeah. Did he have
Oh,
a particular watering hole that was his favorite?
Rainbow Club back in the day.
Oh,
The
yeah,
Holiday
right on
Club.
Damon.
The Holiday Club. Yeah.
Oh, the
Holiday
holiday.
Holiday and Rainbow Club. Like from back in this, yeah. And if it was a bar on Division Street, my dad was there. And if it's an old bar that's been around since the 50s, my dad was there. And yeah, he knew everybody who was ever. It was just so strange because I remember going out with my dad. Like I didn't go to preschool. Like now kids go to preschool.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 80s, you were just like, whatever, they just chucked you into school when you were 6 or something. But
Yeah.
it was a non-traditional household for way back when. My mom worked, my dad stayed at home with us, and my brothers were older, so I would be at home. And my dad was always like really jittery. He always wanted to be out, and he'd be like, "Let's go." I'm like, "Where we're going?" I'm here. Here I am, 4 years old on the L, going downtown to State Street just to get like popcorn at Clark's, or that was my life. Or he was like my tour guide. Like he would take me to Union Station and talk about the architecture of the main hall. We would go to the museums, the different libraries. He loved this town so much. And then of course, randomly, as a true Chicagoan, every single place we went, he knew somebody. Like he was always chatting somebody up. It was the
That's
most
so
bizarre thing.
Chicago of him.
He knew everybody. And of course, he would take me to the bars like as a 4 or 5 year old, stop at Division Street, see his buddies, give me a bunch of quarters, and I'm in the back playing Pac-Man on the arcade games, and he's just hanging out. So true Chicago upbringing.
You know, it's funny. I interviewed a woman who is an artist. She does art, I mean, not all Chicago. She does like horror genre art and also very Chicago art. And she talked about her dad in the same way you talk about your dad. And I believe she grew up in Humboldt Park. I mean, she's probably about 10 years younger. So like in the 90s, like the early 90s and stuff. But her dad was the same way. He would go to all these bars, he'd bring her, and he was like the mayor, where he'd go everywhere and people talk. And she was like, that's how I fell in love with the city, was through my dad. He would show me the beauty of the city that a lot of people would just overlook.
That's funny. That's exactly what he was. We couldn't step out of the house with him without him running into some. He knew everybody who was everybody, and it was just. I mean, I have pictures of him with Mayor Daley. I'm like, what were you doing? Like, my dad wasn't like, my dad was a carpenter. Like, he would install actually, here's a fun story. So he would install carpets at like places like Highland Park or Lake Forest
Hmm.
and like the really wealthy neighborhood, wealthy communities. And so, he would come back and be like, "Hey, I just met Scottie Pippen." I'm like, "What?" And so he's installed Scottie Pippen's carpet at his, place. And so and then I don't know. And then I have pictures of my dad with Daly. I'm like, I have no idea what this man was doing, but he was just that was my dad. He knew everybody.
But just you talking about your dad, he sounds like such a guy from Chicago, like just a dude from Chicago, like that. Because what you're
Yeah.
talking about, like a true old soul, salt of the earth Chicagoan, is that. It's you might not every salt of the earth Chicagoan will know Daly or Pippin, but I grew up with plenty of guys that were like electricians and plumbers, where they'd be like, "Yeah, you don't know, guess where I was today?" And you'd be like, "Oh, where?" Like, "Oh, I was at Jim McMahon's house."
Yeah.
What? Jim McMahon, like or Walter Payton's. I saw him running up the hill in Highland Park or where he used to run up the hill. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but they're like, "Yeah, I was there and I took a picture with him because I was doing install down the street." Like, but that's so Chicago. And then stopping at a corner tavern where it was just, alcohol, and video
Okay.
games, no food, just pretzels and maybe some peanuts, and then they bring pizza in from down the way, like
Yeah.
Phil's. Yeah.
And no one blinking that there's a kid there. Like it says,
No.
"Hey, here's the kid." And so I remember because I would be tired and be ready to go, and then the rest of the people drinking at the bar would just keep handing me quarters, like, "Go play, kid." We're hanging out with your dad. And so yeah, that was just that was the community. Like, we knew carpenters, we knew plumbers. If you're a Chicagoan, cops and teachers. They're in your family. Like these were our people. This was our community. Everybody in our neighborhood knew everybody, down to like the local police that would be patrol. There was a rule in my neighborhood, like, or my dad had a rule for us, like we couldn't go to the end of the block. I couldn't walk to the end of the corner, and I don't know how. I guess the local police knew that too. And I just remember them going on the microphone and being like, and they would come. My family calls me Sina. My friends call me Sina, but the cops would call me Cindy because they knew I hated it. And they're like, Cindy, you're too far. Go back home. And like they would see me and they would tell me to go back to my house. And so
That is
everybody,
very Chicago, old school.
everyone just kind of took care of one another. It was a very different. I, where I live, I still live in the neighborhood that I grew up, and I just remember growing up, everybody was outside and kids were outside, and
Mhm.
so you don't see that much anymore, and that's sad. So,
Yeah, I mean, I live a little north of you. I live right by Superdog.
oh, yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
walking in Devon there, and we moved to the neighborhood maybe like 5 years ago, right during the pandemic, and it was an older community, and it was a lot of Polish people,
Mm,
and we're like, there's no restaurants around here. And after doing stories like this, I talk to restaurateurs and they're like, oh, yeah, where you live? No, there are no restaurants. I'm like, why? They're like, Polish people don't go out to eat, man. Like, they don't, they like make food at home. They'll go to the Polish store and go to, the specific grocery store, but they don't go out to eat, and there was a couple Polish restaurants in the neighborhood. But since then, the neighborhood has changed where a lot of people from the city like Ravenswood or Lincoln Park that just want a little bit more room or whatever reason. And Edison Park now is like the edge of the city. What now that's like gotten so expensive. So my neighborhood's like this little neighborhood that wasn't really affected by all the just changes in the city. As far as like people flipping houses and stuff like that. It was still pretty much like a bungalow row here. And nobody was outside though because it was an older community. Everybody was like in their 70s or 80s, and within the last 5 years people are out again. There's people walking dogs and all this stuff that did not exist in this neighborhood. And my wife and I, we are stoop people. We sit out on the stoop all the time. And when we first started doing it, people looked at us like we were crazy. They're like, why are you sitting on your cement steps, with the
yeah,
drip? Like, what are you doing now? There's several people that do it, and now it's like a thing. People walk by, they say hi. Everybody in the neighborhood. We have our first block party we've ever had a couple of years ago. In the 70 plus years that people lived on the street, they're like, we never had a block party ever. And now all you young people move here, and I'm not even young, but like all you young people move here, and there's block parties. So like there's something very Chicago, and I agree with you that sitting on your stoop outside, people outside, that certainly doesn't happen in the burbs like
yeah,
it does in the city. Just because you're closer together, and you have gangways, and you can hear somebody yell down the street to come home, because you're all in the streetlights turning on, time to go home.
yeah, yeah. No, it's definitely that's definitely the Chicago neighborhood experience. Most certainly.
I was reading with your article that you had in the Tribune, and it was to mention Redgate Woods and going on exploration out there, and it was rainy. Didn't sound like it was great. And then I think I read that you just had a feeling like we need to get out of here when we leave. Like, what was that all about?
Okay, so I never get spooked. Like I just don't. I don't know. I personally don't. I'm like, I don't really believe, even though I write about ghosts, I really don't believe in ghosts. But I just think I think it's fascinating, right?
Hmm.
Um, the reason what I'm most scared of are people.
Yeah, sure.
um,
They're the ones that do
that's,
real harm.
that's definitely what I'm most scared of. But there was just, and there was like a really bad, like, murder a few years back in like a forest, in like a forested area.
Mhm.
And when we were walking through Redgate Woods, and so Redgate Woods, for people that don't know, that's where the first nuclear reactor is buried.
Mhm.
It is wild, but yeah, it's buried at the end of this trail. And I was with my husband and my children, and we're walking through it, and it was like kind of still snow on the ground, a little rainy. you still couldn't really see. It was really dense.
Hmm.
And I just got something that was just like, get out. It was like that Chicago feeling. I think you're in the wrong area. I think you need to turn around. I feel it was just, if you've
Yeah.
been ever walked around, I'm a big proponent. If you're walking down the street and you don't feel comfortable where you're at, cross the street or go into a store or something. And I had that intense feeling there. And so I was just like, I don't know if there's someone hanging out in these woods. There was nobody in the parking lot when we got there. I just kind of felt I gotta go back. So
Oh,
we
I
backtracked.
understand. I've been so I grew up not far from Redgate Woods, where I ran cross country in high school, and we would run to Redgate Woods all the time. So I have been to that nuclear spot. And I've done a story on it there, just because people don't know that it's there, and I'm like, oh my, it's the first. This led to, like, I mean, you can argue this led to the end of World War II. This is the beginning stages of it with the first nuclear reactor and the whole thing, and it's crazy. It's got these, marks, these big giant marks in every corner of where it's buried, like 15 feet below. But it is a fascinating place. And I ask you that just because I've read the article about, Resurrection Mary and going into the bar in that area. I wanted to ask, before it burned down, did you ever go to the Willowbrook Ballroom?
We drove past it. So I never went inside of it, but we would drive because that was what we did in high school. That's many of us and my friends were like, let's all let's pack up in like whoever's like tiny, the Honda Civic.
Yeah.
And we would drive down Archer Avenue looking for Resurrection Mary. And so we would go up and down. And because that's not the only sighting people have seen on Archer Avenue, there's all sorts of things that people have claimed to have seen. And so we would just drive around the haunted locations around Halloween.
Mhm.
But I remember driving past Willowbrook Ballroom, but we never went in.
I'll tell you, that place was absolutely awesome. It was just a
Really? Did you
beautiful
go
place.
in?
Oh yeah, I used to. I mean, I think we're
Oh,
relatively close in the same age. Do you remember when swing dancing was kind of a big thing for a hot minute, like in the
you came
90s?
back? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where they would do it. They would have like these big swing bands at the Willowbrook, and I would go, and my grandma would be like, "You're going to the Willowbrook Ballroom?" And I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, I saw, Benny Goodman there, or whatever." And then, we went there swing dancing, and you go in the bathrooms and you wouldn't even pay attention, but the lights would be flickering, and you just thought it was an old place. And years later, I go back there as a journalist and do a story at the Willowbrook, and they would talk about Resurrection Mary and how she was there, and she went on on Archer Avenue and so on and so forth. And they said, "Oh, but we see her all the time in here." And I said, "Like, what do you mean?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, we would like this woman who, as non-believer as you can get as far as ghosts." She's like, "Oh, I see her all the time in this ballroom." I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" She's like, "Oh, I see her just like walking. I see a woman in a white dress walking." She's like, "I'm the only one in this place, and I see her walking in here all the time." Or
That's insane.
randomly, they'll hear music playing in the Willowbrook, like faintly in the background. And this woman would be like, "Get up and walk around." I'm like, "Who's in here playing music?" Inevitably, it was always music from that era. And she got so used to it, it was like nothing for her. It was just fascinating. But that place, I'm sorry you never got to go inside of it, but
No.
it was a fascinating place. But you talk about going down Archer Avenue looking for all those things. Did you ever go to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery on the southwest
Yes.
side? Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
yeah, good. Did you have
Yeah.
anything happen there?
Nothing happened to us, but we took some. So I've been there a few times, and I had been there a few times, and I told a girlfriend of mine and her husband they were visiting from Minneapolis. I was like, I'm gonna take you someplace.
I've done the
Like
same thing.
it was, I probably shouldn't have, and I think it was around Halloween actually. And I
Hmm.
was like, you gotta see this place. It's so fascinating, and we were talking about like historical some anyway. It was just part of the topic. So we take them to Bachelor's Grove, and the husband really was compelled to go wander out.
Hmm.
And we were like, okay. And like the guy goes hiking on his own, like he'll go kayak to random places and just he's a camper, like
Hmm.
he just does this stuff by himself. And he wanted to go explore the woods, and so we didn't think my husband and I didn't think anything of it. So they left, the husband and wife, and then my husband and I went to go, admire the murky pond where it's been purported that Capone's gang had stumped bodies, and there's
Yeah.
been no proof, but that's like the rumor. And we were waiting for our friends for quite a while, and then they appear, and they looked so pale And all they said was, "We have to leave now." And we were like, "Okay." They didn't say a single word. And that's a walk. It's a
Yeah,
walk
it
to
is a
your
walk.
office. And I
100%.
just remember my husband being like, "What the hell's going on?" And so we got out of there, get in the car, and then they were both like, "We were trapped in a loop. We just kept looping around the same area." And we knew because Steve, our friend, he's like, he marched the trees. Like he knew which tree we just kept marking. And they are not ghostly people. They don't believe in any of that stuff, but I've never seen somebody so rattled. And I just remember being like, Bachelor's Grove, this is, you all got trapped in. I mean, there's so many weird things about Bachelor's Grove as well. So I thought that was
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, I've had some things happen there where I ran for my life from that place, and also cops chasing us because we snuck in on Halloween night. There were witch people practicing witchcraft in there. Oh, it was terrifying to like, we were like, oh, we're gonna be fine, when you sneak in past the cops through the woods, like army crawling past where the cops are stationed, because back then they used to have the cops right outside the entrance on Halloween not to let kids in. So we like army crawled past them in the woods, got in there, and there were people doing like a seance in there, and it was insane. And they saw us, and then it spooked some people. I'm really shortening the story, but nonetheless, it was an experience that I have never forgotten. And it's got a lot of energy in that place, I will say.
And I've seen stuff left behind, like in trees that are like, I don't know, like, weird things. And so
Hmm.
from people that leave stuff, and we're just like, okay. Uh, but I believe when we went, and it's funny because when we went, there was like a volunteer crew there because it was like around Halloween now. Like there's like a volunteer group that will go
Hmm.
and clean up and just sort of make sure around Halloween that no one's like, defacing the headstones.
Yeah.
Well, there were people there when we went there, and our friends got like, I have no idea, but I always remember that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And there's many stories of things. It sounds like there's a lot that you still can write about and weave in through all of the, I mean, you're just getting started in your career. And for people that want, as far as the books, being published and all that stuff. So people want to follow you or find out more. Where can people go for all that good stuff?
So they can follow me on my website, cynthiapelayo.com. I promise I will update it. I'm on Instagram, Cynthia Pelayo author. My backlist is being re-released, which I guess that's a good thing. That's what a
Yeah.
large, a big five publisher picked up my backlist, which includes Children of Chicago and The Shoemaker's Magician, and those are being re-released in October.
Oh, that's
I have
awesome. Good for you.
Yeah, so it's good. It's busy. So it's just a new way of life, and but it's not, I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you and getting to know you a little bit and sharing some of the same love of Chicago. Because I was talking to is it fair to call you a horror author or genre of the horror? I don't know, but I'm wearing a vampire hat. I don't know if you can tell, and it's from the movie Lost Boys.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
I
and I
guess
got
yeah.
and
Oh,
I
you have your the Lakes shirt on.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I was
guess
very excited to talk to you.
awesome. But yeah, I love the horror genre. I write widely in it. I'm also doing some thrillers and mysteries, and so I'll be doing a lot of different things, and so it's coming up. So that's exciting.
And it's really cool that you use Chicago as your muse for some of these things in a way that I've never really seen done before. And it just works. And I'm excited to continue to read your work. And I leave you with one ghost story my dad told me, and I didn't think it was true. And then I looked it up. Do you know the Plush Horse ice cream spot? It's on the southwest side.
No,
It's in like Palos Park, I think.
no.
So it is a legendary ice cream place in that area of the city, just south of like where would it be a big yeah, like Palos Park, right?
Okay.
And close to Orland Park. And if you like ice cream, you'll love it. It's a great place to go get ice cream. But the story goes that back in the turn of the century, like late 1800s, it was a butcher shop. And this butcher was kind of a jerk, and he was terrible, and he was just mean, and people didn't like him. But butcher shops back then were everywhere. And as they started to close, because there's a turn in the economy and people were now being very selective of where they go, butcher shops were closing. And he was late for something on a delivery, paying for something. So the guy's like delivering his latest round of beef or what have you, and it's a kid, right? And the kid falls in the cellar and he accidentally hurts himself and he dies, right? And so this butcher was like, well, shit, if I tell people this happened here, nobody's going to come and eat my stuff. They're not going to shop here. So he like hid the body, and he's like, well, maybe I got to get rid of the body. So he cut up the body and he served up steaks that were made from this guy, and he put them out in his selection for the butcher shop. And I think the guy's name was Herman Butcher is the actual name. He goes so far back to it's your last name, your surname is what you did for a living. And he started serving up like human beef at this butcher shop, and he got to be so people started loving it, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so good, this is so good. People didn't know they were eating it, obviously. And he started like murdering homeless people and vagrants, as they say, in that area, because he thought, well, nobody's gonna miss them, I can take them out and I can serve it up. And he did it for years until the town found out, and they kind of like stormed his house and they killed him. And I believe he's buried at a cemetery that's like in Inglewood, up in the city. I can't remember. I haven't read about the story in a while, but it's a fascinating story. So if you have time, just look up
I'm
like the butcher of like Palos Park or Southwest Side. It's a fascinating story, but I believe the guy's name was Herman Butcher. But the building, and I don't know how much of the original building is still there, but the building itself is very old. When you go there to get ice cream now, it's old, and it's like in a weird spot that shouldn't be anywhere. It's there. Either way, if you want to go for an adventure, because I know you like doing your adventures, go down there and get some ice cream, because the place is fantastic for ice cream. And read about the story about the butcher, because yeah, it's pretty
Thank
pretty
you. I'm
fascinating.
going to check it out. All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been so great talking to you. I'll stop bothering you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for everything. This was fun.